I got back to the apartment in Charlotte earlier than usual that Thursday. My flight from Chicago had landed ahead of schedule, and for once, the taxi line at the airport had been short. Normally, I would have texted Megan to let her know I was on my way, but I thought it might be nice to surprise her. We'd had a tense couple of weeks, the kind where small arguments pile up into something heavier. I figured coming home early, picking up dinner, and maybe just being together without screens or deadlines might help smooth things over. When I unlocked the door, the apartment was quiet. Afternoon light poured through the blinds, casting long shadows across the hardwood. The air felt still, too still, like it had been that way for hours. My suitcase made a dull thump as I set it down, and I remember thinking it smelled faintly different inside, though I couldn't put my finger on why. That's when I saw it. Her smartwatch was sitting on the coffee table. Screen lit up with a notification she hadn't cleared. Normally she wore it everywhere, jogging, at work, even when she was cooking. But there it was, charging quietly as if it had been sitting for a while. I wasn't looking for anything, but my eyes caught the text on the display. Digital key issued, Harbor Crest Hotel, San Diego, 2 guests. The screen dimmed before I could take in more, but it was enough. I just stood there, staring at it, my brain scrambling for an explanation that wouldn't twist my stomach into knots. The Harbor Crest wasn't some budget chain. It was upscale. Glass balconies overlooking the water, rooftop bars, the kind of place you booked for anniversaries or getaway weekends, not quick work trips. I told myself maybe it was a glitch. Maybe the hotel system had issued her the wrong confirmation. But then I saw the next thing. Next to the watch, folded neatly, was a small paper receipt. I picked it up without thinking. 2 cocktails. The date and timestamp were from last night, billed to the Harbor Crest bar. Both were the kind of drinks Megan liked, fruity, elaborate things she'd order when we went out, and both were the same price. I set the receipt down, my fingers stiff, and that's when I noticed the trash bin under the counter. It was nearly empty except for a few scraps. Some packaging, a crumpled napkin, and a disposable razor still in its plastic cover. Not my brand, not even close. I use an electric razor and the same cartridges I've been buying for years. This was the kind of travel razor hotels stocked for guests who forgot theirs. The fact that it was here, in our apartment in Charlotte, when she'd supposedly been in San Diego for work, didn't make any sense. I was still holding the receipt when the front door opened. Megan walked in like it was any other day, shopping bag in one hand, sunglasses perched on her head. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she was wearing a fitted black dress I'd never seen before. She smiled when she saw me, her voice light. "Hey, you're home early. How was the trip?" I didn't answer right away. My mind was still trying to reconcile the pieces in front of me. I held up the receipt, my voice more even than I felt. "Want to tell me about this?" Her eyes flicked to it for less than a second before she set her bag down and walked into the kitchen, her heels clicking against the floor. "Oh, that," she said casually. "Work thing. I told you I was helping the San Diego team with their event. I booked a room at the Harbor Crest so I could meet a client early the next morning. The drinks, my colleague ordered one, but we put them on the same tab. Easier for expense reports." She didn't sound rattled. No pause, no fumbling. She opened the fridge, took out a bottle of sparkling water, and leaned against the counter as if this was the most ordinary conversation in the world. "And the razor?" I asked, nodding toward the trash. She followed my gaze and let out a short laugh. "Housekeeping must have left it. You know how hotels are, throwing in random toiletries you don't need. I didn't even notice it was in my bag until I unpacked." The way she said it was practiced. Smooth, confident, as if she'd already anticipated my questions. Then she redirected completely, asking me how my meetings had gone, whether I'd eaten yet, if I was tired from the flight. She walked past me into the living room, straightening a throw blanket, flipping through the mail. It was neat, the way she did it, shifting the ground under my feet so fast I almost forgot what I'd been asking about. She laughed at something I said, touched my arm lightly when she passed me again, and for a second I wondered if I was being ridiculous, if maybe I was reading too much into nothing. But the facts were still there, stubborn and quiet. A hotel key for 2, cocktails billed to the same room, a razor that wasn't mine. She moved on with the evening like nothing had happened, talking about a new project at work, asking if I wanted to watch something on Netflix, even suggesting we order Thai from the place down the street. I played along, smiled when she smiled, nodded at the right places, but inside, my mind was still circling those small pieces of evidence, replaying her easy explanations, the way she never once looked uneasy. The signs were right there in front of me. I just didn't know then how many more were coming or how far the story really went. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop replaying that moment in the apartment. Her watch on the table, the Harbor Crest key notification, the receipt for 2 cocktails, the razor in the trash. Megan's explanations had been so casual, so tidy, that part of me wondered if I'd imagined the edge in her voice when I first asked. But the other part, the one that had been quietly collecting little inconsistencies for months, wouldn't let it go. Once I started thinking back, the past few months unfolded in a way I hadn't noticed at the time. It wasn't one big, obvious shift. It was a series of small changes, each one easy to dismiss on its own. But together, they painted a picture I didn't want to look at. There were the sudden client calls late at night. She'd step into the other room, closing the door behind her, and come back 20 minutes later claiming it was just work drama. If I asked about it, she'd roll her eyes and tell me I wouldn't care about the details. Then there were the silenced notifications. Megan used to keep her phone on the table, volume up, not caring who saw the screen light up. Lately, it was always face down, always muted. If a message came in while we were watching TV, she'd tilt the phone away from me to check it. I remembered the new lingerie. 2 sets, both expensive, both nothing like what she normally wore. When I'd asked if it was for a special occasion, she'd laughed it off, saying she just wanted to spice things up. But we hadn't exactly been in a season of spontaneous romance. Around the same time, she'd switched to a perfume I didn't recognize. Not subtle either. It lingered in the car, on the sheets, in the hallway hours after she'd left. One day in April, I'd seen a charge on her card for a high-end spa in Scottsdale. I didn't think much of it until I realized it was the same day she'd told me she was in Nashville for a conference. When I asked about it, she claimed she'd gotten mixed up about the receipt, that she'd booked the spa for a friend as a gift. There was also the late checkout payment on her card twice, at hotels she'd supposedly stayed in for day trips, where she'd left early in the morning. I joked once about her getting lazy on business trips. She'd smiled thinly and changed the subject. The old phone was another thing. Megan had always upgraded her phone when I did, every 2 years. But one morning she told me hers had finally died, and she'd picked up a cheap temporary replacement until the new one arrived. She said it was just for work calls, that the switch had been a hassle. I didn't think much of it until I realized she never seemed to have both phones in the apartment at the same time. The strangest excuse of all was the yoga classes. She'd say she was meeting a group at a hotel downtown that rented out their conference room for fitness. But when I checked the hotel's public event calendar one afternoon, there were no yoga classes listed ever. I didn't confront her about it then. I just filed it away with the rest. Looking back, I can see how each of those moments chipped away at something in me. At first, I told myself she was just busy, stressed, trying to find space in her own way. But then my brain started connecting dots I didn't want connected. One night, lying awake while she slept beside me, I realized the pattern wasn't just in my head. Every unexplained trip, every odd receipt, every little change in habit, they all seemed to have the same structure, the same places, the same timing. It was like she was living a second life, and I was only seeing the edges of it. And yet, she was careful, too careful. When I asked questions, she had ready-made answers, answers that sounded plausible in the moment, even reasonable, but always just vague enough to leave no proof. She didn't get defensive unless I pushed, and when she did, it was always about how I was overreacting or reading too much into things. Still, the evidence was stacking up. A week after the Harbor Crest key incident, I caught a glimpse of her phone screen in the reflection of the microwave door. She was texting someone whose name I didn't recognize. The tone looked familiar, not strictly professional. She saw me watching, turned the screen over, and asked if I'd seen the electric bill. It was such a jarring pivot that I almost laughed. I started keeping small notes, dates, places, times, scribbled in my work notebook between meeting reminders. It wasn't that I was planning to confront her yet. I just wanted to be sure I wasn't building a case out of thin air. But with each entry, the pit in my stomach grew heavier. I told myself I needed undeniable proof. Something that couldn't be explained away with a charming smile and a quick change of subject. And I had no idea that proof would find me on a day I least expected it, our anniversary. We'd been invited to a barbecue at some friend's place on Lake Norman. Megan had declined, saying she had to finish a project for work. I went alone, grateful for the distraction. The sun was just starting to set over the water when someone handed me their phone to show me a funny video on Instagram. I scrolled to the next clip without thinking, and froze. It was Megan. She was on a poolside lounge chair, wearing a bikini I'd never seen before, kissing a man I didn't recognize. The video was short, just a few seconds, but enough to make my chest tighten. The next clip was worse. The two of them disappearing together into a hotel room, the door closing behind them. The room number was clearly visible. The post had a geotag, a luxury resort in Scottsdale. The caption, a note indicating 2 guests. The timestamp on the video matched our anniversary. I stared at the screen, my ears buzzing. This wasn't a blurry photo or a vague suspicion. This was her in daylight in public with someone else. I handed the phone back without a word. My mind was already racing ahead, cataloging every piece of evidence I'd collected, every inconsistency she'd smoothed over. It was all there in sequence building to this. The proof was irrefutable now. But the part of me that had been hoping I was wrong, that part was gone. I didn't leave the barbecue right away. I sat there by the lake, drink in hand, pretending to listen to the conversation around me, while my mind played that Instagram story over and over. Megan, a man I'd never seen, the kiss, the hotel door closing, the room number, and the kicker, our anniversary date stamped right there for the world to see. The noise from the party blurred into a low hum. I was already calculating time, place, details. My thoughts were mechanical, almost detached. I think part of me was afraid to let the anger in just yet, because once it came, I wasn't sure I'd be able to shut it off. When I got back to my car, I sat in the driver's seat with the door open, scrolling through the video again. I took **TS of every frame where the room number, the man's face, or the geotag was visible. Then I saved the entire story using a screen recorder, just in case she deleted it later. Driving home, I wasn't even thinking about whether to confront her. That was inevitable now. What I was thinking about was control, keeping myself steady enough to use this, to make sure she couldn't wriggle out of it like she had with everything else. When I walked into the apartment, Megan was on the couch with her laptop. She looked up, smiled faintly. "Hey, you're back early. How was it?" I dropped my keys on the counter and said, "I saw something today." She tilted her head, her expression still soft. "Oh? What was it?" I pulled out my phone and hit play on the video. I didn't say a word, just held the screen out toward her. The moment she saw it, her whole body changed. Her smile vanished, her posture stiffened, her breathing hitched. She glanced at me, then back at the video, then at me again. "Where did you get this?" she asked quietly. "From someone at the barbecue," I said. My voice was calm, too calm. "Do you want to tell me what I'm looking at?" "It's not what you think," she said, already moving into damage control. I laughed short, sharp, bitter. "Really? Because it looks like you, on our anniversary, kissing some guy in Scottsdale and going into a hotel room with him. But sure, tell me how I've misunderstood." Her eyes darted around, searching for an angle. "That was a mistake. I'd had too much to drink." "Don't," I cut in. "Don't insult me with that. There's a timestamp. There's a geotag. There's literally a note that says 2 guests. Do you think I'm stupid?" "I wasn't thinking clearly," she said, her voice shaking now. "We were there for a client meeting, and one thing led to another." "Stop." I held up my hand. "You've been lying to me for months. Late night calls, silence notifications, Spa days in cities you weren't supposed to be in, hotel stays with late checkouts, yoga classes that never existed. And now I have this. I shook the phone for emphasis. You don't get to pretend this is an accident. She closed the laptop, set it aside, and leaned forward like she was going to reach for my hand. I don't want to lose you, she said. You lost me the second you closed that hotel door behind you, I replied. For a long moment we just stared at each other. She was breathing hard, like she'd run up a flight of stairs. I could see her running through scenarios in her head, deciding which version of the truth, or some edited, watered-down version of it, might do the least damage. I didn't give her the chance. I went to my desk, pulled out a folder, and started printing the screensh *TS. Every one of them went into a neat, labeled pile. The video file I backed up to 2 drives. Then I logged into our joint bank account and took more screensh *TS, charges that lined up with her trips, the spa, the hotels. By the time I was done, I had a small but airtight collection of evidence. That night, I emailed the entire package to myself, my personal cloud drive, and a secure folder on an external hard drive I kept at the office. Then I called my attorney, Sandra, and told her we needed to meet first thing in the morning. The next day, I handed her everything. The screensh *TS, the video, the receipts, the geotags, even the booking confirmations I'd pulled from Megan's email months ago. Sandra flipped through them, nodding slowly. This is clean, she said. Dates, times, proof of presence, financial corroboration. She won't be able to talk her way around this. That's the idea, I told her. By the time I left her office, I had a plan. I was going to make one final statement to Megan, clear, unambiguous, and final. No arguments, no debates. Just a closing line to end the story. That afternoon, I sent a single text through Tara, one of her closest friends who still spoke to me. Tell Megan, I've seen enough. The divorce papers are with my lawyer. This is final. According to Tara, she read it within minutes. She didn't reply. Not then. I spent the next 2 days quietly moving the essentials into a small apartment I'd rented near my office. No forwarding address, no shared calendar, no trace she could follow unless I wanted her to. I left the keys to our place on the kitchen counter, along with a copy of the message I'd sent her. When I shut the door behind me, I didn't look back. It wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no grand confrontation, just a clean exit. And in some ways, that was worse for her. Megan thrived on debate, on finding small cracks to wedge her explanations into. I wasn't giving her that. The proof was there in black and white in high-definition color with timestamps and location data. And for once, there was nothing left for her to say. 2 days after I left the apartment, Megan finally broke her silence, though not in the way I expected. I'd blocked her on every platform before moving out. Not out of spite, but because I knew what her first move would be. Flood my phone with explanations, excuses, and accusations. I didn't want the noise. When Tara told me Megan had read my message and said nothing, I thought maybe she'd taken the hint. But then, one afternoon, Tara called again. She's been trying to get through to you, Tara said. Calls, texts, even showing up at my place. She says she needs to explain. I don't need an explanation, I told her. She's got the facts. She knows why I'm gone. Yeah, well, she's not letting it go, Tara said. You should know that. Later that day, I saw Megan's number flash on my phone. The block must have expired automatically, or she'd found a workaround. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, she called again. And again. The messages that followed were a strange mix. Some long, pleading paragraphs about how she'd made a mistake and loved me more than anything. Others sharp and defensive, accusing me of throwing away everything over one bad decision. The tone swung so wildly from guilt to indignation that reading them felt like standing in a wind tunnel. I didn't respond. Instead, I saved every message, every missed call log, and every voicemail in a separate folder. Sandra was already working on the divorce filing, and part of her process was gathering anything that showed a clear, consistent pattern of behavior. She'd already told me I had more than enough, but she wanted to build a bulletproof case. A week later, she called me into her office. You're not going to like this, she said. handing me a stack of freshly obtained records. They were full transaction histories from Megan's accounts. Every charge, every transfer, every tip, every late-night bar tab. The dates lined up with places I already knew about: San Diego, Scottsdale, and others I hadn't connected yet. And then I saw it, 2 earlier payments to the Harbor Crest Hotel. Not the recent trip with the digital key notification I'd seen, but older ones. Each had a matching charge for the same hotel bar, always after 11 p.m. Always for 2 drinks. It wasn't just one trip. It wasn't just one man. As if to seal it, Sandra had something else for me. A friend of yours, Liz? From college? She reached out after hearing about what happened. Said she saw Megan in Houston last month. I frowned. Houston? She said Megan was with the same man from Scottsdale, Sandra continued. They were at a restaurant, holding hands across the table. Liz recognized Megan immediately, but she didn't know the guy. She figured you already knew. I didn't, but I did now. It was a strange feeling, confirmation without surprise. The pattern wasn't just a gut instinct anymore. It was documented, repeated, consistent. And it wasn't limited to one bad weekend or one poor choice. When Sandra asked if I wanted to bring any of this up to Megan before the hearing, I said no. She's going to hear it in the courtroom. I'm done being the messenger. That night, back in my small apartment, I sat at the kitchen table with all of it laid out in front of me. The videos, the receipts, the transaction histories, Liz's written statement. It was overwhelming to look at as a whole, like reading a story about someone else's life. But it was mine. I thought about sending her one last message, something blunt and final, but I realized I'd already done that. The note I'd sent through Tara: I've seen enough. The divorce papers are with my lawyer. This is final. Was all I needed. It wasn't a conversation starter. It was the last word. From there, I focused on the logistics. Sandra had already started lining up the filings and the requests for property division. I made a checklist. Close joint accounts, transfer recurring bills to my name, set up new passwords, reroute mail. Each task felt like another door closing behind me. I didn't hate Megan. That would have required more energy than I was willing to give her. What I felt was sharper, cleaner resolve. The only communication I allowed to pass between us went through Sandra. If Megan had a question about the settlement, she called her lawyer. If she wanted to send me a statement, Sandra read it first. That filter turned down the noise to almost nothing. Still, her attempts didn't stop entirely. She sent an email through her attorney once, trying to frame everything as a misunderstanding and hinting at reconciliation. She claimed the man in the videos was a mistake she immediately regretted, that the other charges were business-related and misinterpreted. Sandra read it aloud to me in her office, and when she finished, I just said, "File it under creative writing." By then, my life in the new apartment was starting to feel less temporary. I'd bought a small dining table, hung curtains, even started cooking again instead of relying on takeout. It wasn't home yet, but it was mine. No unspoken tension in the air. No watching someone's phone light up across the room and wondering if they'd flinch. I also started running again, something I'd stopped doing years ago. The physical exhaustion helped me sleep, and the steady rhythm on the pavement felt like a kind of therapy, quiet, repetitive, mine alone. If Megan thought the silence between us was a tactic, she was wrong. It wasn't a strategy. It was the point. I didn't want to negotiate the terms of my leaving. I didn't want her input on my next move. I wanted distance. And the final message, simple, sharp, unchanging, wasn't just for her. It was for me. It reminded me that there was no version of the story where I walked it back. No phone call I'd take in a moment of weakness that would undo what I knew. The moment I'd seen that video in Scottsdale, the last page had already been written. Everything since then had just been the paperwork. The silence didn't last. Once Megan realized I wasn't going to respond to her attorney's carefully worded clarifications or her scattered personal messages, she shifted tactics. First, it was the late-night calls. I'd wake up to my phone vibrating on the nightstand, her number flashing again and again, sometimes 20 or 30 times in a row. She never left voicemails at first, probably hoping I'd pick up out of sheer annoyance. When that didn't work, the texts came, long, winding paragraphs alternating between apologies and blame. One message would be about how she'd never stopped loving me and made the worst mistake of her life, followed almost immediately by another accusing me of overreacting and destroying our marriage over a one-time lapse. I read them all once. Then I stopped. I'd promised myself I wouldn't get dragged into a back and forth that led nowhere, and I meant it. Still, I saved every one of them, forwarding them to a secure folder Sandra could access. "This is gold," she told me when we met later that week. "Not for the divorce itself, we already have more than enough, but to show the judge her mindset. The inconsistency speaks for itself." Sandra had also been busy digging deeper. With my permission, she'd subpoenaed additional financial records from Megan's accounts, including ones I hadn't even known she kept. When I saw the statements spread out on Sandra's desk, it was like looking at the map of a road trip I'd never taken. Each stop a different city. Each date a match for one of Megan's supposed work trips. San Diego, Scottsdale, Houston, and now Miami. All with overlapping charges for hotels, restaurants, and, like clockwork, bar tabs just before midnight, always in pairs. "What about the men?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Sandra leaned back in her chair. "We have solid identification on the one from Scottsdale and Houston, the guy from the Instagram video. But the Miami trip, different man, different hotel, same patterns." Hearing it said out loud made something in me go quiet. The idea that this had been one mistake was laughable now. This was a routine, a habit, maybe even a second life. As if to hammer the point home, Sandra had also been contacted by Liz again, the same college acquaintance who'd spotted Megan in Houston. This time, Liz had gone a step further. She'd pulled up the photo she'd taken of the man and cross-referenced it with a LinkedIn profile. His job? A regional sales manager for a company Megan had never mentioned working with. Liz also told Sandra that when she'd run into Megan in Houston, she hadn't just been holding hands with the guy. They'd been acting like a couple, laughing, leaning into each other, ordering for each other at the table. Not the behavior of two people sharing a purely professional meal. I didn't need the confirmation, but I welcomed it. Sandra asked again if I wanted to confront Megan with any of this. My answer stayed the same: no. She can see it all in the courtroom. By this point, the divorce proceedings were in motion, and every day felt like walking through a slow, methodical dismantling of a life. I'd meet with Sandra in the mornings, sign paperwork, review evidence, and then go back to my apartment to pack away whatever pieces of the old life I still had. Boxes of clothes, books, framed photos I wasn't ready to throw away yet but didn't want to look at. Megan's pressure campaign didn't let up. After a week of unanswered calls and texts, she switched to showing up in person. She came to my office once, waiting outside the building until I walked out for lunch. I saw her standing there, clutching a folder to her chest like she'd rehearsed this as some kind of dramatic movie scene. "Mark," she said when I stopped a few feet away, "we can't end it like this. Please just hear me out." "You've already said everything you needed to," I told her. "That's not true," she said quickly. "I never got to explain the whole thing. If you'd just listen, you'd understand." "I understand perfectly," I cut in. "You've been lying to me for months, years maybe, and I've got the proof. That's all I need." Her expression flickered. Anger, panic, and something almost like disbelief that I wasn't playing my part in her script. She tried again, her voice dropping into that low, emotional tone she used when she wanted to draw me in. "I know I messed up, but we were good once. We could be again. Don't throw it all away." "It's already gone," I said, and then I walked past her, leaving her standing on the sidewalk. 2 days later, she tried again, this time at my apartment. I didn't answer the door. She knocked for several minutes, calling my name through the wood, until she finally gave up. When I checked later, there was an envelope taped to the door. Inside was a handwritten letter that read like her text messages, equal parts apology and accusation. I didn't even finish reading it. I scanned it, saved it for Sandra, and threw the original away. Around this time, Sandra got the last set of documents she'd been waiting for. They were comprehensive enough to settle any lingering questions. Flight records, hotel invoices, meal receipts, rideshare logs. Each one lined up perfectly with the pattern we already knew. "This isn't just a one-off," Sandra said, sliding the final page across her desk toward me. "This is a lifestyle. And the fact that it continued even after you confronted her with the Scottsdale video? That's going to carry weight in court." I nodded. "Good. Then let's make sure the court sees all of it." I didn't care about humiliating Megan. I cared about the truth being undeniable on the record in a way that no amount of charm or deflection could undo. From that point forward, I stopped thinking of it as my marriage ending. That part was already done. What was happening now was just the formal acknowledgement of a fact. Megan had chosen this path a long time ago, and I was finally choosing to stop following her down it.